Hey everybody, really glad you guys are here today, and just wanted to take a few minutes and answer some of your questions. We know that some of your groups have already started kicking off and probably been running for a couple of weeks, so we anticipate that you will probably have questions about just kind of how to, once you've gotten started, got them maybe in small groups and kind of figured some stuff out, what are some next level questions. So Jonathan, what do we have today as far as people sending in questions to us?
Yeah, this is a question from Steve. Um, on the Trek Essentials, if they have students that say after 4 to 6 weeks they're not doing their devotionals or Bible readings, they have no desire to earn any of the awards, should they switch them over to Trek Essentials book or keep them using the book they're using?
Well, I think that's first of all a really good question. I think you're starting to see some things there. I guess the first question I would ask, and just kind of to push back on it, and I'll answer the question as best I can. But the first question I would be asking if I were talking to Steve, you said his name was?
Yeah.
Um, and to any other leader was, did you allow your students at the beginning of the year to select the book themselves? Sometimes our propensity, or our normal thing that we do at Awana is kind of say, okay, everybody gets plugged into a Bible study unless we have a good reason not to. But the group that I've been running this year, actually, we started off with a leaders meeting and then a parents meeting, just to say, here's the options, here's what your students are going to have, but also told the students, this is kind of what this Trek Essentials does, and this is kind of what the Bible study does. You need to go home and work out with your parents which one makes the most sense for you. Some of them had parents that wanted them to finish an award, and the student was on board with that, and so that made a tremendous amount of sense. Some of them, though, weren't ready, and their parents even knew that to some degree. Like, my daughter's not going to be ready for as much depth as you're providing here. They may need to stop and kind of back up and say, let's just do the Trek Essentials. So the first thing that I would challenge on is, did the student have any choice at the beginning as to selecting which book they were working on? If the answer is no, which it sounds like in this particular situation that you probably started them all off on a Bible study, then I would go back and ask them the question. Which book do you feel might make more sense for you? Show them the essentials. Tell them exactly what it does. Help them understand, here's what this book does. We want you to still participate, but this is 2 pages as opposed to 8 pages. It has some of the questions, so you can kind of get some of the same things, but at the same time, it's not going to be the level of depth. I would ask them where they think they are on their spiritual journey and why it is that they're not doing their devotions. Sometimes the component that you're dealing with is really a lack of motivation because they don't understand, and sometimes so it needs more explanation. This is why we do this, and this is why we're doing these Bible studies. This is what we think it'll help you with. They have buy-in now on why did we do these particular things. Sometimes it's I'm overwhelmed. I'm not sure that with all the stuff that's going on in my life, with all the things that are taking place, I'm not sure I can handle this. And so they say, listen, I'm going to opt for the smaller book. I'm going to opt for the Essentials book because right now my life is kind of chaotic. I got a ton of outside schoolwork, or I got a ton of schoolwork. I got a ton of outside stuff going on. I'm in a play. I'm in 2 sports. I just don't have the physical or mental capacity to make this a priority right now. The natural inclination is to say, well, then maybe you shouldn't be here. I think that's a mistake. I think the reason is because we have this all-or-nothing mentality sometimes with Bible studies that if you're either in or you're out. I think with students, especially as they're making this transition from being a child to being an adult, they're young people. They're trying to figure out how to navigate some of these things along with their spiritual life. If we're honest as adults, we're still navigating some of that ourselves. We know that we have a job and we have kids and we have other responsibilities at church and all these things. So how do you manage your devotional life? I think the truth is a lot of us navigating through some of that. We've got to give grace and space to those students to say, listen, maybe I need to take a step back and look at these Trek Essentials and do that, as opposed to saying either do the Bible study or leave. That may not be where they are right now. And that's why we made the Essentials. We made them for students who are still trying to work through, hey, you know what? I'm not sure what I believe, but I don't know how deep I'm ready to go. The Essentials allow them to kind of get on board so that you, A, haven't basically said leave, and you haven't lost them completely. You've engaged them at a conversation where they're at with the intention that you're going to bring them back to the Bible study eventually. That may not be till they get to high school. That's okay. The key component here is knowing your students. And in my mind, as often as possible, let your students help make the choice. I have some students in the group that I'm working with whose parents don't go to church. So the parents aren't even going to participate in the conversation. But I can tell right now from my preliminary engagement with them that putting them in a Bible study is a mistake. They're going to leave, and they're not going to come back. And my opportunity to continue having faith conversations about what God can do and is doing in their life will be limited, because basically I said you either do it my way or the highway. That's why the essentials are there. It's not my way or the highway. It's the highway. It's also the frontage road on the side that will get you there, but just a lot slower. Or if you don't want to do either, if you're not interested in engaging at all, if this spiritual conversation is for you, just not something you're interested in, then that's a completely different conversation. I think you need to have that with them, because they're still showing up, which tells me that they're at least preliminarily interested in the conversation. Give them options. Let them make decisions. As a leader, I think at the end of the day, you need to help them learn to make the decisions, not just decide for them. So hopefully I got to the heart of that. If there's another point to that question, or if there's some nuance to that, please let us know, and I'll do my best to answer it. But other than having a conversation, and I know there's some other leaders who've said similar things, that's how I would respond. Let your students decide and work with them to find the best solution that will help them grow where they're at right now. And that may be an essential and not a Bible study, and that's okay. That's why we made them.
All right. Another question is kind of on the similar line of this was how to keep kids or get kids motivated to do all the work within the Bible studies, or even just the truck essential, I guess.
Yeah, I think the first thing you have to start thinking through, and again, this comes back to knowing your students. I think what you have to start thinking through is what motivates different kinds of kids, because the natural inclination would be to say, we're going to put up one form of motivation that motivates everybody. I'm not sure that's the case. I'm not sure that the motivation has to be one thing for everyone. And the reason is because if you've read any of the psychology books or that talk about different personality types or different love languages or different things like that, you understand people are different. What motivates them is different. So what motivates one person as more of an extrovert would be to be with the people. That's why they're coming. What motivates some of them as an introvert may be to, as my son likes to say, level up, to get something else, to put myself in some kind of situation where I feel like, hey, you know what, I'm progressing in stages here. I think you need to understand your students first and foremost, and not simply try and create one lump solution. That being said, let me give you some hints and some suggestions on how you can do that for different types of kids. For extroverts, I think you need to remember kids who love being together. I have a student in my group who I can tell already is just loving being around the other students. She will come just to be together with those people. So if it's you need to be able to do this so that you can talk to other people and you explain that to her, she's all of a sudden participating, writing down answers to her devotions, because this is going to get me ready to participate with other people. That's one of the motivating factors, is the people that I get to talk to. They're going to be prepared. I'm going to be prepared. We're going to get to have really cool conversations, and that's something that motivates me. So all the external stimulus in the world, all the, hey, I'm going to buy you a new T-shirt, I'm going to do all this, that won't matter to that kid. They want to be with people. Use the people as part of the motivation. Help them understand how doing the devotions helps encourage the conversation, helps make the conversation better, and all of a sudden you've got them understanding, hey, this is actually going to make for a better group experience, which is why I'm coming, than if I don't do it. As far as motivating introverted kids, I think you're going to have to really think through what is the reason that they're showing up. For some of them, it's about discovery. And really trying to think through and work through what they believe. This is an internal process that they're wrestling with. And so you've got to think through, how do you motivate that kid differently than you motivate the extroverted kid? Because they're not coming there simply for the rest of the students. They're coming there for another reason. My first thing, and I know this is going to seem like a broken record because I say it so many times, but my first thing is always ask them. That sounds stupid in some ways because it's like, well, but they're not going to know the answer. But they might. Start by just asking them, why do you come here? What do you love about this place? What is it that you're looking for? Those are some really basic questions, but you might find out all of a sudden, hey, you know what? I really love the leader. And I really love just being with this person. I only come for one person, and that's it. But I love being with this leader because the leader teaches me every week, and I feel like they care about me, and I feel like they're being close to me. So the answer for the incentive is you. That's an odd thing, because some people will say, well, I don't really feel like I'm that much of an incentive. But trust me, you are at times. Your attention, your appropriate affection, and I don't mean affection in the sense of you're giving them hugs all the time or anything. Remember, please be appropriate with your students. But I mean your kind words, your ability to show them that they matter, that they're valued in that space, maybe the only reason they keep coming. Your opinion then of what they're doing will raise, hey, you know what, I really love that you did your devotions. Just say that to a student and watch that incentive go up. All of a sudden, this matters to them. If it matters to them, then I should probably keep doing it. You also have some students who are motivated, as I said before, by leveling up or getting different prizes, things like that. And that's why we have the AwanaYM store, because we have different levels, little balls and things to play with that you can give to students that are fairly cheap, all the way up to T-shirts and different kinds of tech devices and coffee mugs and all kinds of stuff, backpacks. If that's something that you need to motivate them, then think that through. Think through how you're going to use those particular individual pieces to say, hey, listen, you finish this review, you get this ball. You finish this thing, you get a T-shirt. You finish this third review, you get a backpack. You finish this, you get this whole bag of stuff. If that's what it makes it work, then think that through as well. That's going to be a budget thing, and you're going to have to think through what kind of dollars do you want to spend and how do you want to engage that. And it may just be, hey, we'll buy you a backpack at the end of the year. That's fine. I think you need to help figure out. I know some other people have used Trek Bucks in this particular situation. They buy the Trek Bucks. Basically, the students use them to buy something in real life, like on the AwanaYM online store. They can use those Trek Bucks basically to buy something real on that store if they earn a certain number of dollars. That's another way that people I've seen have used to externally motivate a student who needs to level up, who needs to earn something. They use Trek Bucks. They use their own system of ways of basically saying you've gained something here that will get you something in the end. There's a lot of different ways to motivate them, and I would really encourage you to think through, as your experience goes, to think through exactly what is it that's motivating this section of my students versus this section of my students. But as much as I harp on it, as much as I say it, I would always start with one simple thing. Ask them what they think. Ask them what's motivating to them. Ask them why they show up. That may give you a tremendous amount of insight into understanding how you can incentivize them, how you can keep going.
Great. I have a few questions regarding the Bible reading.
Sure.
Just kind of want to recap some of this stuff. But is the reading of the New Testament required for Trek for the Essentials Award?
No, not for the Essentials. If you're doing the Essentials, that's an optional thing. Obviously, the Essentials do not have a large award, the Meritorious Citation, even the Timothy. You're not going to get one of those doing an Essentials. So the Bible reading is an optional thing, I would say. I would encourage the students to do it, but as far as memorizing the key verse and memorizing, and giving a summary, that's going to kind of be up to the leader. I think for the Essentials students, I would just encourage them to read it. Follow the reading plan. Even if you're not doing the memory work, even if you're not doing the recitation stuff, just let them read through the scriptures. One of the goals for the Bible reading plan was to get the students engaged in the scriptures long-term, reading the entire thing so that they know, hey, you know what? I read the entire New Testament in middle school. That's a cool achievement, even for some kids who were saying, listen, I have a really hard time working through some stuff. We broke it down so that they could put it into manageable chunks to read through the entire New Testament before they're finished with middle school. So it is optional, but I would encourage it, especially for the Essential students, just to do the reading, if nothing else.
Okay. The Bible reading that's mentioned at the end of each lesson, how is that connected to the Bible reading summary? What does that mean? What's the relationship between
You're
those?
talking about the Bible reading question at the end of each lesson? Okay, so the Bible reading question at the end of each lesson is essentially there for accountability. It's not a sign-off to say that they finished something. It's an accountability question, because what we found when we had these Bible readings before with Journey was that we had students who would essentially wait until the end. and they go, oh man, I totally forgot that I was supposed to be reading. No one never brought it up, or maybe they did once in a while, but I kind of forgot. This is a prompt for the leader to ask the student every single week, what are you reading? What did you finish? What did you work through? Are you ready to say a summary? Are you ready to say the verse? Are you ready to finish something that I can sign off? And the sign-offs are in the back of the book. This is literally just for them to track progress. So for instance, let's say they're reading through Matthew. It's not probably realistic to think that you're going to read Matthew all 28 chapters, or I believe it's 28 chapters, all 28 chapters in a week. That student may read chapters 1 through 6. That's awesome. Write it down so they can keep track of it. But then you'll know, hey, you know what, you read 1 through 6 last week, you read 6 through 9. Now you read 9 and 10, or 10 and 11. You're kind of slowing down here. Is everything okay? Or, you know, do we need to encourage you? How can we help you? Or you may see, hey, you know what, you're kind of coming up on the end of the book. Are you ready to say a section? Are you ready to say the Bible verse? Are you ready to say a summary back to us in your own words? Listen, that's what the question's for. It's to keep asking, hey, how you doing? How's it going? Do you need encouragement? Are you falling behind? Is it finals week and you just needed to take a break? It'll give you some insight into where the student's at. It's more an accountability question than it is a sign-off. So use it every week just to ask the student, so how's it going? That's basically what the question's there for. And then they can track their progress. So they know, hey, you know what, I finished that before this week, or I finished this week, so that you can get a sense, especially for those larger books, Matthew, Acts, John, where they have a lot of chapters, Romans. You may not read it all in 1 week. It may be too much. You may want to chunk it up, and we don't expect them to do that. If you're reading through the 3-year Bible reading plan, remember that they're only reading 9 books in 1 year. They're going to do much smaller areas, so that question is there just to kind of keep them on track and keep them focused so that they can finish it all before the end of the year and not feel like, hey, I got to the end of the year and I had to read 9 books of the Bible in less than a month. That's a lot of work to do. We want to do our best to help them be accountable, but also make sure that they finish in an appropriate way so that they're not rushing through it. Because that was the other thing with the Journey students. When they rush through it, have they really thought about it? If you're just trying to blow through it as quick as you can, no, you need to take the time to kind of process it and think about it and let it kind of marinate in your soul, if you will, just to kind of allow it to change and shape and mold you, because that's what the Word of God can do. It changes and shapes us and molds us if we give it the time to really, as Psalm 1, meditate on it, to impact our thinking. We're not going to do that if we're rushing. So we want them to basically be accountable every week to see what they're doing.
Is there a particular plan or the reading, like what they should do to read each week to stay on track?
Yeah, some people have asked us if there was going to be a daily plan, and we really didn't want to put a daily plan out because the problem with the daily plan was that we knew that there were students who were going to say, well, I got to stick to the daily plan, that I missed it in a day, and I'm not going to. We really want this to be self-paced. And the truth is there may be spaces where they get a lot done, there may be spaces where they don't get a lot done. They're living life just like you are, and truthfully, there are weeks I get a lot more done than others. There's some weeks where just a lot's happening, and I got to go to conferences, and I got to go to see, my kids play, and I got to go. I'm not going to get as much done in those weeks. So it's okay if there's a week where hey, I read Matthew 9 and 10 as opposed to 5 chapters, I read 2. We wanted to be really careful that we weren't putting this in a space where it was, hey, you didn't read your reading for this week, so now you're behind. Those 9 books, we wanted to make sure. Now, if you want to plot those out, I believe in a couple of apps, Bible apps, you can actually set to read, hey, you know what, I want to read the book of Matthew in a month. And they'll do that for you. You want to read the book of Matthew in a month? Here's what it's going to take to get that done. You can have them use an app to set some kind of plan up like that, but we didn't want to, especially because some of the epistles are so short, maybe 2-3 chapters. You're going to knock those out. You may knock those out entirely in one sitting. So we're just trying to be careful as far as that goes, that we're giving them options, but I want to leave it up to them to start working through some of those things and how they're going to manage them.
That circles back to those questions, the Bible reading questions.
Exactly. Because, and that's why you're asking the question. It's not a matter of are you doing all the things you're supposed to be doing. It's are you keeping up with the stuff you're supposed to be doing. What kind of pace are you on? What kind of, how do you want to get this done? Because there are going to be some students who do chunk reading. They do 7-8 chapters at a time, and then they don't do anything for a week or two. I think it's incumbent on the student and the leader to think through which one's going to work best for them, because there are some kids, who are going to do chunks. And then there are other kids who are going to do not so many. And that kind of goes back to the devotions question. We've had it before. Somebody asked us about the devotions. They said, well, what happens? Does a student have to do them in 7 days? And my response was no. There are 7 days in there. We'd like them to do them every single day. But we know that there are some students who are going to do 2 in one day and 3 in another and 2 in another and do it in 3 or 4 days. That's fine. It's manageable. You could still do it that way. We want to encourage the practice of doing it every day. But at the same time, for some students, that's just not feasible. They have school, let's out at 3 o'clock. Then they have an extracurricular activity, sport or something like that. And then they're done and they come to your group. They don't have any time that day to get anything done. So they may have finished it all the day before. That's fine. They need to know their schedule and start planning. This book is going to force some discussions about how you prioritize and plan your life, your spiritual life, as well as your calendar and the things that you schedule in your day. How are you going to get this done if this is really important to you? And those are things that even as adults we're still working through and working on to make sure that we get the stuff done we need to get done, the types of Bible studies we attend.
Yeah. It looks like all the questions for right now.
Okay.
So you want to wrap it up, and we'll be back again in another 2 weeks.
Yep. Back in 2 more weeks to answer more questions, and we really appreciate them, so keep them coming. You can post them to Facebook or Twitter, and we'll get back to them as soon as we can. So one of the things I want to encourage you in is start seeing students in small groups that start telling me stories, and there's moments where you're in the middle of a conversation and the student starts telling a story, and we have a tendency to kind of say, okay, I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to talk, but what I've noticed is that when I gave the space and time for the student to tell their story, there was a tremendous impact on the rest of the group. And what wound up happening was, on different occasions, students will tell a story that then becomes kind of the focal point for the rest of the conversation. And that's an amazing experience when somebody tells a story and then somebody goes, yeah, my story is a little bit like yours, or my story is a little bit like yours, or you know what, my story is a little different than yours, but it has this same thing in it. The problem tends to be that at times some of those stories get to be long and we want to kind of rush students through them because we've only got a limited amount of time and your story is taking 5 minutes. That's going to come down to the judgment of the leader, but I would just encourage you, sometimes you need to let that student tell the story, especially when it's the kid that doesn't talk much. There's moments where those kids had to summon a tremendous amount of courage to tell a story. Let them finish. You can tell when it's rambling and when it's nonsense and when it's going nowhere. You know that the story is just, them trying to get attention. But when something has meaning, when something has weight, and you can tell weight in a moment because you can see that everybody else, and so this is one of the best ways that I've shown people that you can tell weight. When somebody's telling a story that has weight, you'll look around the room. Just pay attention to your students. If the rest of the students stopped what they were doing, and this is my favorite 2 inches, but if they all lean forward just 2 inches, everybody's there. They're all paying attention. Something just happened in that moment that just grabbed them and held them. Don't mess that up by talking. I know you want to get through your questions, but sometimes that story may be the most important thing that's going to happen in your night, and I've seen it. I've been asking students to tell me stories, and when the right person tells the right story in that moment, God begins to use it to help other people start telling their stories, to challenge them, to encourage them. But that means you're going to have to kind of press pause on, I got to get through these questions. That's okay. You're not going to finish all the questions in the discussion. The key to the discussion is that they're working out their faith. And the stories that they're telling about how they're doing that are so powerful, so encouraging. Sometimes what the best parts, the best ones to me are the reason when I stop and realize, hey, wait, I just leaned in 2 inches to hear what the student just said. Because something changed in me listening to them talk. And all of a sudden I'm encouraged. And all of a sudden I realize, you know what? I'm doing this and it matters. And stuff's changing. And God's doing amazing things. But we'll miss that if we try and rush somebody. Hey, you got 1 minute. Hurry up. I got to move on. Take the time to listen to amazing stories because students are going to start telling them. And as they tell them, don't feel rushed. Let God work. Let God work through the students in the lives of the students that are sitting in your group with you. because he may be speaking to someone, and you don't want to miss that moment because you're rushing through to make sure you finish all of your questions. I know that you love your students, and I want to encourage you. You are there because you are investing in their lives. You are there because God called you to be there. Stick with it. Listen to their stories. Tell some of your stories too, because when you tell a good story, they'll do the same thing. Be encouraged and be blessed. Your students are getting to know each other. Your students are discovering that their words have power, that they can shape each other. Continue to encourage them to tell the best stories that they can, because at the end of the day, you won't regret it. Have a great week. If you have more questions, please let us know. God bless.